It's time for FLA Law, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
Good evening. This is Attorney Matthew Noyes. I am one of the partners at the law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes, the longest established personal injury law firm in Pinellas County, in fact, in Tampa Bay. We've been helping people after car accidents, work injuries, Social Security claims, and other types of personal injury matters since 1955. We are here to help you tonight for the next hour, to be here live to answer your questions regarding personal injury matters or any type of legal questions that you may have. It's always better to call early. And while the lines are still open, and the number to call in with your question is 441-3000. But I'm not here alone. I'm here with my partner, Attorney Lori Robinson.
Yes, very happy to be here. It's been a few weeks since I've been able to sit on board here.
Yes, and we're glad you're here. Now, you may not know this, our listeners, but Lori and I are both dealing with a little bit of a cold, or I call it allergies. So we apologize. We apologize in advance if I break you off into a cough or something.
I'm hoping I don't knock the water over.
That's right. But we are here to answer questions that you have. Again, the number is 727-441-3000. We are live on the radio, but we are also live on the firm's Facebook page, and that's Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers, right on Facebook. And if you don't want to call in with your question, but you still have a question, please feel free to just type your question in the comment section, and I have it right in front of me, and we'll be able to address those questions for you as well. So without further ado, Lori, why don't you, although you've been here several times, why don't you just briefly tell the listeners a little bit about you and about the firm?
All righty. Well, I'm a Clearwater native.
You are.
And, I really feel very attached to Clearwater. Actually, we're quite blessed to live here. It's a fantastic place to be. And I've been at the firm, hard to imagine now, it's been 25 years, actually. And that's most of my legal career, but not all of it, because I've been practicing law for 44 years. Because I started when I was 10 or
That's
something
right.
like that.
That's right.
But I'm a board certified civil trial lawyer. And that was one of the things when I came to the firm in 1998 that I was able to complete the requirements to attain that, which is a certification for lawyers that have demonstrated that they've had a certain number of trials and have proficiency.
And there's only about 3% or 2%
Something
of lawyers
like
in the state of Florida that have that.
Relatively small number of lawyers that attain that.
So congrats to you. And Brian Caulfield in our office, too, is a board-certified civil trial lawyer.
That was a part of how I was able to complete those requirements by trying a couple of cases with Brian over the years.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, and so Lori is very well versed in all areas of social security, disability, but personal injury, civil trial, workers' comp as well. And so before we go into one of those areas, why don't we take our first caller?
Wow. Okay.
It looks like Christina is on the line. Christina, thank you for calling. How can we help you?
Hi, just a question for you guys. With the time change, people seem to be driving a bit crazier. Do you think that that's normal?
Amen. I thought the same thing when I was driving here. I thought the sun was shining in my eyes a little bit different than it normally happens.
So is this like a full moon or something?
No, it's just a time change because and in fact, that's a very good question, Christina, because I did write a blog article on this a few years ago, and studies do show that car accidents increase for about the week after the time changes, whether it's falling back or springing forward. And the reason why that is because people's body is used to waking up at a certain time or going to sleep at a certain time. So there is a little shift in the body chemistry, but also the sun's different. The pedestrians are walking, the kids are walking home from school, and the drivers are driving home from work, and the sun's is a different
location kind of thing.
Different location. And so it makes it a little more difficult to be able to drive. the way you used to be able to drive last week.
Well, and I think even commonly, I mean, I didn't know that. I hadn't done any research like you did, but just the idea, I am conscious of the fact that you just feel a little bit discombobulated, the day or so. I don't think about it lasting a week, but it probably does. Yeah.
The studies show that it takes about a week for most people to get used to that time change. And what also, it's because they're spending more time driving in the dark. Because it gets darker earlier.
Yes.
And so they're driving more in the dark. And unfortunately, more accidents happen in the dark than during the day.
Sure.
So, Christina, that is something that is not only you're noticing, but a lot of people are noticing that as well. In fact, science shows that is what's happening.
Very interesting. Actually, learn something new every day.
Yeah, so drive safely and watch out for those guys who don't because of the time change. Thank you for calling.
Okay, no, that's
all right. But it's not only car accidents, believe it or not. It's also work injuries.
Really? Wow.
Work injuries are often increase after the clocks change as well, for the same types of reasons. The workers are a little more tired because their sleep pattern got messed up, and so they're a little more drowsy while they're doing their work. And people that are doing high skilled machinery work need to be alert all the time.
Right.
And then also just their body, if it's getting darker earlier and they're supposed to be working, it's just has an impact. But it only takes about a week. The studies show that it's about 6% increase in car accidents.
That's amazing.
The week after the time changes.
Wow.
So
now there's this big push to try to have daylight savings all year, but you still have problems either way, I guess, because of depending on when it gets dark or light. But I don't like it when it gets dark at night so early.
I know it is a little more challenging to do that. Just on a side note, because I know you would appreciate this, because Lori is an animal lover.
That is true.
But also because of the time change, statistics show that more deer are hit.
Oh my gosh!
When the time change, because their body too is not used to it.
The deer itself is there.
The deer get hit. There's more deers who get hit on the roads after the time change.
Well, that's terrible.
But again, only for about a week, and then everybody gets back to normal.
Yeah.
So it is odd. So just during this week, that get your body used to the time change, your eyes used to the sun being at a different level in the sky while you're driving home, and
just being aware. That's really is a good point, actually, to be aware of our physical awareness and condition when we're driving, because you kind of go, that situation where you're like an automatic pilot,
right?
And you get to your destination and you're like, wow, I don't even really remember driving that. Yeah. So especially something like that, which is affecting a little bit.
Yeah, and pedestrians, they're walking at their normal time, but it's a different set of lightness or darkness while they're walking.
And lighting could always be a factor with accidents.
So it is a challenge. We see, Lori and I have been helping people in car accidents for decades. And
very long time.
We have seen many different ways car accidents happen, and we always say we should write a book about how some of the crashes
so you can remember
occur.
it after a lot of years go by, but a lot of them you do remember. I mean, you can't drive anywhere that you don't think, oh, well, that's when so and so.
Yes, that's exactly true. That's exactly true. So that does free up a line. The number is 727-441-3000. And Lori, we're kind of talking about being a board certified civil trial attorney. That means we have to go to trial.
Yes, it does.
And we have jury trials. I know there's some famous cases going on right now that's not a jury trial, it's a judge trial or bench trial. But we have jury trials.
Right. And it's a little interesting area of the law that I learned myself recently, because we have both a federal and a state constitutional right to jury trial. But in civil, that's not necessarily the case. That it will depend on your particular state. The federal constitutional right, the Seventh Amendment, hasn't been applied in all instances, which is why we have the famous case that is actually a bench trial, which was kind of surprising to me.
Right. I didn't even know that.
No, I had to look it up because I really was like, what? What about the Seventh Amendment? But in Florida, we do have jury trials in the civil cases, and of course those are the type of cases that we're handling, and that's that's why I became a lawyer. Really, I love debate, and that we all do. Really, that's kind of what we like. Yeah, and so it's a natural area of law because we get to have that opportunity to go into the courtroom and present our client's case before a jury. It doesn't happen too often because in most instances, most people are not hoping to be in the courtroom except for you and me.
Yes.
Basically, I like doing it, but we're trying to achieve the best result for the client. And so often the way that happens is the insurance company knowing that we will in fact go to trial if we can't get a reasonable offer under the circumstances, and we'll do a good job. And so that is the basis for being putting together the case that gets you the best result possible. But it's all brought up against, which is a very important right, that right to have a jury of your peers listen to the case and listen to the law and then apply that law.
About how many cases do you think on a percentage-wise go into a jury trial?
Yeah, I have heard various percentages over the years. I don't think it's more than maybe 1 or 2% at this point.
I know. And that's amazing because people think, my goodness, we have to go to a jury trial. We have to tell our clients all the time. Just because we file a lawsuit doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to a jury trial.
Right. And it's like, and over the years, the number of jury trials has become fewer. And, there are a lot of reasons for it. It is expensive to go to trial and that sort of thing. But and maybe that's the part on the other side too, because usually you're able to get the case resolved without having to go all the way to a jury trial. But it's not infrequent that you might have to run pretty close up to having the trial.
Right. You have to show, and I was going to say that we need to, if you're going to file a lawsuit, you got to be committed really to go all the way to a jury trial if that's what the insurance company makes you do.
Yes.
You never want to have all those expenses in it and all that time, and then 6 months or a year after you file a lawsuit, you say, okay, I give up.
Right.
And because then what happens, the client nets less of the recovery because of the costs that were incurred.
It's always requires careful planning, doesn't it, to try to handle the case in a way that will produce the best net result into the person's pocket, the client's pocket. And so a lot of the big costs for trials are, for that reason, are going to only be at the end, because you don't want to incur those costs if they can be avoided and the case can be settled at an acceptable level. But nonetheless, we do go to trial. I've had, in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of episodes of that. And those are things that are an important part of our practice, because it allows us to evaluate cases for the clients well and kind of guide them through the process so that they know what they're looking at. But it's such a long process.
Yeah,
and that's, also, if you get into the litigation and it does end up being a case that needs to be tried, that typically is a pretty long process.
Right. Our website is Voice of the Injured. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a perfect example of us going to the jury and being our client's voice.
Absolutely.
They've been wronged. Their life has been changed. They have to live a new normal because of somebody else's negligence. And it's our duty, it's our, blessing, so to speak.
And passion, really.
And passion to be that voice and to let 6 people of their peers see how the negligence has impacted our client. And unfortunately, the only recourse is monetary. We can never reverse time and make the crash not happen or make the pain go away.
Yes.
But it is monetary. And so we need to make sure that the person, that our client who is injured, is justly compensated for the new normal that they have to face.
Right. And it's very tough for people because it is a new normal.
Right.
If you have a significant accident, a lot changes.
Right. And some people think that, okay, I've watched it on TV. We're going to go to trial and we'll be done in a day or even in an hour. That doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. No, and it's
why don't you tell the listeners about how long, just a framework of a jury trial and how long it takes.
The typical we're going to say auto accident case because that's typically the kind of case that gets tried. Although there are other situations with the slip and fall.
We had that slip and fall case.
Right. Yeah. Actually, one of our last ones that was a pretty good result for our client. And she was such a nice person.
Oh, my goodness. Wonderful.
But the typical case is really going to be approximately 5 days.
Right.
And so
you say 5 days. What are you talking about?
Right. So you have to take off work. It's like, and it's not how most people really want to spend their vacation.
Right.
But the jurors. That's always, it's very difficult for people that get called to jury duty out of the voter registration list, they're and driver's license lists, actually. Yeah. So you're in this situation where they have to be interviewed. So that's how the trial starts. We do an interview of the jurors, and that's typically going to take several hours.
Right. That's called voir dire.
Yes. The French word to speak the truth.
Yes.
And,
jury selection, but yes.
You're right. I mean, and that's something that, and then you begin with what they call the opening statements, where the lawyers make an opening statement about their case. And then the testimony begins, and that so that will, of course, be a big factor as to how much time it takes. But most of these cases are going to end up being certainly 3 days, probably 4, and maybe even going over into a little bit of the 5th day.
Who gets to put on their evidence first?
So, of course, the way these things work in civil cases is the plaintiff, and that was who we represent, the injured party, the person bringing the claim.
The good guy.
Yeah, that's what we would say. Yeah. So and it would be true. I mean, not that most times people obviously don't mean to cause an accident, but you do have to be accountable for your negligence. I mean, if you make a mistake, you weren't paying enough attention, you caused an accident, obviously you need to be responsible. And fortunately, the insurance system, although there are a lot of problems with it, and they're kind of unfair in a lot of ways, but the insurance liability system does provide a way, if you are able to get an award from a jury, to actually receive some compensation for what you've gone through. So, so it's really
the plaintiff gets to go first.
They go first, put on all the witnesses. There's what they call direct examination, where if we're starting the case, we're going to be asking questions of the witnesses to bring out the evidence, to introduce the exhibits. Now, this part is like what you would see on TV, except probably not as exciting as what you would typically see on TV. But it's pretty much what you would see.
But you get people to talk about how the accident occurred. You may have witnesses, or you may have other people that first talk about the crash.
Yes, particularly if there's a dispute about how the accident occurred. Now, many times there isn't. If you have a rear end collision, usually, although not always, that's something that is hard for the defense to contest. But if it's a left-hand turn at an intersection, either by the person making that turn or the person coming through who thought they had the right of way, I mean, there are a lot of situations where there can be some argument about responsibility, or whether there might be what we call comparative responsibility, a little comparative negligence, that kind of thing. So if there's a dispute about how the accident happened, then there's also there are going to be witnesses testifying to how it occurred, and if there's evidence in the roadway or something that would bear on that, there could be things of that nature. Occasionally, depending on the facts, there may even be accident reconstruction experts that would, if there's a dispute about certain things as to how the crash occurred. Not too often, but sometimes there are cases that do merit that type of testimony. Yeah. So
and then we need the medical testimony to come in,
and that's really for auto accident cases, and for the typical case, that's really the biggest part of the case.
Right.
And so now, before COVID, it would be very common to bring the doctor in live because we were all used to that. And it is ideal, although it is quite expensive, because if a doctor has to close their practice for a morning or an afternoon, because you can't really give them an exact time usually. The court will give you, if you're going first, you can kind of have a sense of when you might need them. But it does end up being a little bit difficult sometimes to present them live. So now what we're seeing more and more are videotaped presentations. And we had done that some in the past before COVID, and it does work pretty well. And depending on the case, you might still elect to present someone live, but it will either be live testimony of the doctors, one or more, or it will have been testimony that had already been prepared by doing a video deposition for trial purposes, which would be just like what would happen in a trial. The defense lawyer would have an opportunity to cross-examine the doctor, that kind of thing.
Right, and then our client and or their spouse would then testify as well.
Yeah, so you would have. Usually we start with we like to start with the strongest and end with the strongest, and so often we'd end with the client's testimony. Other types of testimony that is typically presented would be 1 or 2 or 3 at the most, what we call before and after witnesses, people that know something about the person that they might be able to.
Normal and the new normal.
Yeah, and can kind of bring that to life a little bit. Sometimes when there's there can be elements where a person has lost significant wages in the past or earning capacity. And so there can be witnesses that would be related to proving up the numbers there. And if there's a future loss of earning capacity, even an economist that would give a basis for projecting into the future what the value would be of the person's lost earning capacity. So, but again, that doesn't necessarily happen in just the most typical case, but it does happen in something where the person's had that type of a loss that they've experienced.
Yeah, and then the defense gets to put on their case.
Yes.
And then ultimately we get the closing arguments.
Right.
And then we have the jury instructions. And then we have the verdict finally, the jury deliberation, and then the verdict.
Yeah, so you can.
So that's why you can see it takes 5 days at least.
Right, absolutely. The defense always presents their. If there's a dispute about the facts, they'll have their side of that, and then they always have what they call the independent medical exam of our client. So some doctor hired by the insurance company examines the person, ostensibly for an hour, but they see them for 5 minutes basically, and they pretty much. They write a report that supports the insurance view of the case, basically. Now, the jury doesn't get to know that it's insurance.
Right. And we're going to talk about that, because I think that's important. It's one of those, did you know, kind of things.
Right, yes.
But if you have any questions regarding the jury trial or the process once you have to file a lawsuit, give us a call at 727-441-3000. Lori and I also, and the firm also do workers' comp, and we also do Social Security disability. So please give us a call regarding those issues as well. We're here to give free legal advice for the next 32 minutes. So it does look like Margot has called. And Margot, thank you for holding. How can we help you?
Hi. So first off, my phone is about ready to die. So hopefully I can get through this call.
Okay.
But I just had a question. My cousin was hurt on the job a month or so ago, and he's just getting a runaround with his employer and, I guess the insurance company. If you're hurt at work, isn't he supposed to get paid by the insurance company?
That's a very good question, and we appreciate you holding and asking that question. I'm gonna let you go if you need to go because of your phone. I don't want you to run out of charge.
Worst thing ever, right? We can't do that.
But continue to listen. We'd be happy to answer that question because that's a good question that we hear a lot in our work accidents. Yes, the answer is yes. They should be entitled to being paid by the workers' comp insurance company under certain situations. Yes. And that's why you need the lawyer to try to explain what those situations are.
And a lot of times, people really don't, if they haven't had a workers' comp claim before, they don't really know what to do.
And where to start.
And depending on their employer's attitude, a lot of employers aren't too thrilled about having to deal with workers' comp, so they'd rather not have a claim.
Take a few days, take some time off, take your vacation time.
Right, and see how you feel kind of thing.
Right, and those are totally wrong things to do.
Right.
After a workers' comp accident, believe it or not, if you're out for only 7 days, you don't get paid. And you don't get paid for the first 7 days until you're out for 21 days. So it's kind of crazy because you could be out for, let's say you're out for 20 days. Well, you got paid for being out on day 8 through 20, but you don't get paid for days 1 through 7. It's crazy, but that's what the statute says. But you don't get paid even for 8 through 20 or any other days afterwards unless you have the proper documentation. And the proper documentation has to come from a doctor. But most importantly, has to come from a workers' compensation authorized doctor. You can't go to your family doctor and get a off work note and think workers' comp's going to pay. They won't. Workers' comp is only responsible to pay once an authorized doctor has you on restrictions. And the first restrictions, let's say the doctor says you can't work at all. Lori, can you explain to our listeners what wage benefits they would be entitled to if the workers' comp doctor says you can't go to work at all because of the restrictions you have from this accident?
Sure. So if you're restricted from all work, then what happens is the workers' comp carrier calculates, they go through your 13 past, your wages for the past 13 weeks, and they calculate your average weekly wage, and then you're entitled to be paid what's called the compensation rate, which is 66 2/3% of that. And so that's a temporary total compensation benefit that you're entitled to. So long as you have that workers' comp doctor saying you can't do anything. Yeah.
Right. And that stays, they have to continue to pay the temporary total disability benefits, the 66 2/3, until the authorized doctor changes that. And if the doctor changes it and says, okay, now you can go back to work, but you have lifting restrictions or sitting or standing restrictions, what happens to the injured worker at that time?
Yeah. So if your employer affords you a position that meets those restrictions, then there's a complicated formula that workers' comp has in the statute that basically you're entitled to what they call indemnity benefits, temporary partial disability, but it's works out to be approximately 80% of what your compensation rate is, because you get 80% of the difference between your average weekly wages.
Yes, it's very confusing.
It's like, I always have to go look it up. I mean, it's but from just a practical point of view, I mean, you're entitled to, it's a reduced benefit somewhat. But
it is a reduced benefit. And what happens is, let's say the injured workers I'm going to pick easy numbers.
Yeah.
The injured worker's earning $100 as an average weekly wage. He gets restrictions, and the employer says, well, you can come back to work, but we're only going to pay you $50. Because he's not earning 80% or $80. He's entitled to that $50 from the employer, and also temporary partial disability from workers' comp. What's that amount? They say, okay, well, you're not earning 80%. So what's the difference between what you're earning and the 80%? In our situation, it'd be $30. So he gets 80% of $30. So he'll get the $50 from the employer and I can't do that math that quick, but the 80% of the $30 from workers' comp. But if the employer says, listen, we have work available for you, but we'll pay you 80% of what your average weekly wage was. The problem is he gets 80% of his average weekly wage, and he gets nothing from workers' comp. So he's really taking a loss in that situation. I met with somebody a few weeks ago that was in that same situation.
Wow, yeah, that's one I haven't personally seen. So that I could see where it could happen. But
he had two jobs, and he couldn't do his second job at all. But it was still his first job
would still
would pay 80%. So he lost all that earnings from the second job and didn't get compensated
there was no way to
for
get recovery for that. Yeah, and I hadn't thought about it, because that's a situation you could easily have.
Right.
And if you have and a lot of people will have a side job, a smaller one. They're
right.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to remember in the workers' comp case, is that if you do have a second job or a third or a fourth job, Uber or anything else, those wages are calculated into your average weekly wage.
Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up.
And so that's important to do. But those temporary partial disability benefits continue as long as you have those restrictions until you reach maximum medical improvement. maximum medical improvement, especially in a workers' comp case, is that magical moment in time where a lot of things change. What happens to the wages at maximum medical improvement?
They end.
They do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They do end unless you're permanently, totally disabled.
Right.
But the wages do end at maximum medical improvement, even if the employer doesn't have a job for you.
Yes. And
that's just hard to
it's very hard to
understand.
Yeah. And of course, the theory is we've now gotten you as good as we can get you. Maximum medical improvement means you've reached that point where the doctors are saying there's really nothing we can do to improve your situation at that point.
Go back to work, but not at the job where you got hurt if they replaced you.
Right. And you might, and unfortunately, sadly, what can happen so often really is if you had a serious injury, maybe you don't really recover fully to the point that you could do the type of work you were doing, especially if it was physical work. And that's very tough because workers' comp has no obligation. I mean, the law doesn't even permit them to pay anything for that kind of loss, which is just the loss of your earning capacity, basically.
Right. And we see that a lot with it. I mean, we represent a lot of nurses who get hurt, high earning nurses, and they get hurt. All of a sudden they can't do the duties anymore. They can't lift the patients anymore. And it's like, I went to school. I lived my life to be a nurse. Right. It doesn't mean they can't do anything. So they're not permanently and totally disabled, but they can't go back
to do the work they've been trained to do and
to earn the money that they did.
Yeah.
Now, workers' comp in Florida does have something called retraining benefits, but I think it's more statutory than really happens because the state decides whether or not you qualify for retraining. And if you qualify for retraining, then workers' comp has to pay you while you're being retrained. But if the state doesn't fund the retraining program, which has happened in several years, then there's nothing to be there's no money. So
theoretical option that's not really out there for people. Yeah, we don't see. And I'm trying to think of
we don't have a lot of retraining
when we've seen that really, and it's too bad because the situation I just mentioned is a big issue for people is losing their particular vocation, so to speak.
Exactly. Well, that was a very long answer for Margot. I'm sure her phone would have died by that time. but it is very important. And those are just the kind of things that, you're a hardworking person. All of a sudden you get hurt at work and now you have to think about all these things. Right. There's no way that an injured worker can fully understand what their rights are under workers' comp, but also what their responsibilities are under workers' comp.
Yes.
And that's why it's important that if you do get hurt at work, that you consult with an attorney that understands the rights and the responsibilities. I get a little annoyed with people just always talk about what your rights are. Well, it's not just what your rights are. You also have to know what your responsibilities are in order to get those benefits.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And that's what Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes does is we try to educate the people who get hurt, whether it's an auto accident or even a workers' comp case. You got to educate them.
That's a big part. Lawyers are counselors at law also, attorney and counselor at law. Well, there's a counseling part of it.
Right.
Yeah. Very often, actually.
Right. What I think it's probably a good time. We're running a little bit late for our break, but why don't we take our first break? I can get a drink of water here so I don't sound like I'm talking with a frog in my throat. But while we're at break, give us a call, 727-441-3000. For any questions regarding auto accidents, work injuries, even Social Security disability, which we're going to touch on when we come back. So give us a call, and we'll talk to you on the other side of the break.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
In 1955, the law firm now known as Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes made a decision. Instead of taking whatever cases came through their doors, they decided to focus specifically on personal injury. 64 years later, the law firm is one of Clearwater's longest-running personal injury firms. Available 24 hours a day with offices in Clearwater and throughout Tampa Bay, they're ready to put decades of experience to work for you if you or a loved one has been injured in a car accident or injured due to someone's negligence or recklessness. If you feel overwhelmed, uncertain, or unsure about your next steps after being involved in an accident or after a loved one sustained serious injuries due to someone else's negligence, call Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes at 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. That's 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. Non-attorney spokesman.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Attorney Matthew Noyes, and with my partner and co-host Lori Robinson. We are two attorneys at the law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes. We have been serving the Tampa Bay area since 1955. And we are here to serve you live to answer your legal questions for the next 19 minutes. I do have a cough drop in my mouth now, so I'm ready to go.
I'm thinking I don't know how that plays.
But we are here to answer questions regarding auto accidents, workers' compensation, Social Security disability, and any other questions that you may have regarding the law. We both love the law, and so we're able to answer any questions that you have. But one thing before we go, I want to talk about the did you knows about auto accidents and the jury trials. But I also don't want to forget how important it is to talk about Social Security disability. Social Security disability is a big part of our practice because so many people need it. But Lori, what one piece of advice would you give to people that are thinking about Social Security disability?
The best and most important advice I would give is to basically speak with your medical provider, and this should be a specialist, not just a primary care, about the issues you're having that are causing you to feel you cannot do your work, or if you stopped working. Social Security is a medically driven record, and so there's got to be medical evidence from a specialist, really, that is talking about what's going on. But I suppose, you could kind of roll back because obviously, I spent today talking with a couple of people at some length. So probably it's a very complicated process. So probably the first thing you should do is just call an attorney that does that, because it is, we spend a lot of time counseling, again, people so that they can plan, because a lot of times, the lady I was talking to today, she is working, but she's having a tremendously difficult time continuing and, seeing herself continuing, basically, and so, but people don't really understand. And, even a lot of the doctors, unless they, for some reason, have done something in Social Security, they don't really know the Social Security legal standards. So probably the best advice would be give us a call, set up a telephone conference, and we can talk to you about your situation to help you plan. Right,
because medical documentation is so important. You can't win a Social Security disability case without medical documentation.
And a lot of times, like the lady I talked to today, she had a longstanding problem, chronic back pain, like many people do, but she hadn't really seen an orthopedist in many years, because you get to a certain point, what are they going to do? So she was, so the counsel is you've got to set up some specialty care, follow up with an orthopedist so that your situation can be updated. Talk to them about what problems you're having that relate to the inability to function in a workplace on a regular basis. And then hopefully they can help. If the doctor can help, fantastic. That's better than any Social Security case. But if, unfortunately, you're at a point where there's only so much they can do, now it's in the medical record showing what your limitations are, which that's what's so important.
And I talked with a potential client today, who was a plumber. He's been a plumber all his life, and he has back injuries that he can't do his plumbing. But he didn't understand, because it's very hard to appreciate, that just because you can't do plumbing anymore doesn't automatically mean you're eligible for Social Security disability. In fact, he was driving for Uber because he couldn't do plumbing. And he was earning substantial gainful activity, enough money to disqualify him for Social Security. And so there are times that we say, listen, this may not be the right time to apply for Social Security disability. And in fact, I told him, I said, call us back in 3 months and see how you are in 3 months. And if we can't help you, we'll help you. But if you can stay off Social Security disability, stay off of it. But that does give me an opportunity to shift a little bit. It does look like Nancy from Clearwater is on the phone with the question. So, Nancy, how can we help you today?
Hi there. I have a quick question. I've been noticing a lot of TV commercials with attorney firms, and just tons of commercials.
Amen.
and everybody has a different type of case. How do you know who to go with? At least the time the law firm's been open. Is there any red flags you should look for? Who do you contact?
Nancy, it's a very good question, and part of my gray hair is because of all those TV commercials. That some TV commercials give personal injury attorneys a bad name. I always recommend that you don't rely solely on a TV commercial. There are so many other ways for you to get to the right attorney. It may not be us. It may not be Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes, but you need to do the research. And TV commercials may be enticing, and they may be pretty, they may be good, but that's theater, quite honestly. And so the most important thing I think you need to go to is your friends and your family. Talk to them
Word of mouth.
Talk to them about who they would recommend. And then that's just step one. Step two, then, I would say, is to go and research those people. Get on Google. Research those people and look up their reviews. What do clients say about that person? Mm-hmm. And there's other ways to do it too, Lori. You have others?
Well, I'll say, since I am a researcher by nature, it's like, and of course we live in this world where it's like, you have a question, Google it.
That's right.
But I would say that the web pages, now you don't stop there, but it really does give you an opportunity to read about the different lawyers and get a little bit of a sense of the firm. And obviously we would say that experience is very important, which I think it is very important. Yeah. Right. And then honestly, you pick a few and go talk to them. That's important. Yeah. And I think the Florida Bar website is a good place to go to also, because you can do further research. You can see how long that attorney has been licensed in the state of Florida.
I was going to ask that if you could call like the Clearwater Bar Association.
Well, the Clearwater Bar, yes, but the Florida Bar is even more important, because the Florida Bar, and you wouldn't call them, you just look them up and Google, because it will tell you the date that attorney was admitted into practicing law, but it will also tell you any disciplinary actions that they may have had.
Yeah, so it does give you a little bit of information that you should have about anybody that you would consider hiring.
Right. So you never want to solely rely on any one of those things. The TV commercial may spark you to do some more research about that. But friends, families, medical doctors, there's this stigma that, the doctor referred you to the attorney, so they must be in cahoots, or the attorney referred you to the doctor, so they must be in cahoots. That's crazy, If I want somebody who knows what they want, who knows something about a special area of law that I have experience in, I'd be wanting to tell that person that.
Yes, and I think that's because it's actually, the bar is big. So if somebody asks me about a lawyer in a different specialty, there are lawyers that we know.
We do that all the time.
Yeah, but a lot of times, it's hard because it's a very big area. So you don't necessarily, but where you do. And likewise the doctors.
Just say, for example, there's so many personal injury attorneys.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my gosh.
Who you pick? Who's the best? Who's going to service you better,
No, that's right. And that's why it's important that you do the full research. And then after you do the full research, you go talk to them.
Yeah.
And, talk to the attorney who's going to handle the case.
There you go, right?
Yeah, well, it is a no-cost consultation.
Right.
And it's not just us that do no-cost consultation.
No,
they all do no-cost consultation. But that gives you an opportunity to see if that's a good fix a good match.
Or if you feel comfortable, sometimes you get the vibes and sometimes you don't get the vibes, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, because it is a personal relationship with your lawyer, because typically it's going to take a little while.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we tell our clients all the time, hey, you're going to be stuck with us for a little while, you know, depending on how the insurance company behaves. But Nancy, thank you. That's a very good question. It's not asked enough. And so every week, if we get to answer that question, we would love to answer that question, because it is important. You don't want to get to an attorney that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah,
and so thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for giving us a call and asking that question.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a nice evening.
You too. Bye. And so, Lori, we were talking about the jury trial, and two things that I've heard. In fact, yesterday I was having a conversation with the grandma whose granddaughter got hit by a car. And she was all mad that the driver didn't get the ticket. And she was like, I can't believe she didn't get a ticket. Now how are we going to prove our case and such like that? Why don't you tell our listeners, you know, what's the effect of a ticket, especially in a jury trial?
Right. There's absolutely no effect. In fact, it's not even admissible in a jury trial, because, you know, the police officer, when they issue a ticket, unless they actually saw the accident, which obviously they hardly ever would have, they are not witnesses to any of that. So that would not be admissible. So the ticket is just that has to do with the traffic infraction, the civil rules regarding that. You know, it might have some persuasive weight in the early settlement negotiations, but truthfully, it doesn't have anything to do with establishing.
The fact that they got the ticket doesn't mean you win liability. No. And the fact that they didn't get a ticket doesn't mean you lose liability. You
have to prove it up through witnesses and you know, other factors involved in the accident that argue in favor of a particular point of view.
And that blows the mind to some people when you tell them that. You know, it's like, oh my goodness.
Because it's quite natural when you're at the scene of the I was going to call it the scene of the crime, no, the scene of the accident. You know, basically
that's your public defender is talking,
and you feel like the person blew a red light, or, you know, some obvious thing. Now in that scenario, you'd hope they would get the ticket, but not always, because the police officer maybe hears one version here, one version there. He can't resolve
decide.
It.
Right.
You know, so it's like, I can't really issue a ticket here.
Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter from our perspective in representing someone. But that's very commonly misunderstood. Everyone thinks that should be so important. So the flip side of that is, if you're in an accident and you do believe that you are not at fault, yet you somehow got the ticket, call up the attorney, and you can call us or anybody and review the facts to be sure that that was an accurate finding. A lot of things can be pretty debatable.
Right. And another thing that sometimes surprises people is that when we're at a jury trial, even if the at-fault driver wants to settle the case, doesn't want to go to a jury trial, they're the ones sitting at the other side of the table. But are they the ones who's going to pay the verdict?
So the insurance company would be the one to be responsible. Now, if the person that caused the accident actually had assets and your verdict, your award was greater than their policy, which is a whole other topic, you know, then they might be responsible in that scenario. But that's rare. Really, the bottom line is cases are resolved within insurance policy coverage, yet the jury never gets to hear there is insurance.
Well, and we had a situation in one of our trials, you know, several years ago, where the defendant was sitting at the other table, the defendant's table, and he had plenty of insurance, and that's why we were bringing the claim. It was a claim against the insurance company, albeit we have to put it in the name of the driver.
Yes.
Because jurors aren't allowed to know about insurance. But the jury was deadlocked. And in fact, remember that woman came out and said, I can never enter a judgment against that gentleman.
Yes, and that's really one of the more challenging things in trying a case, because, you know, the gentleman that was responsible for the accident
wasn't going to pay a penny.
Yeah, and yet you could understand where a person would feel sympathetic towards him, even though he caused the accident. You know, yeah, but. Now, I think it's unfortunate that the jury isn't allowed to be told about insurance. You'd hope people know about it, but obviously they don't, as we learned and knew.
A lot of people don't know about it.
Right. Yeah.
There is one way we can get insurance into a jury trial, though.
Yes.
And it's always the most important insurance coverage everybody should carry. I said every time I'm on this radio show, I'm going to say what the most important car insurance is. And what is that, Lori?
Uninsured motorist coverage.
Amen. Uninsured motorist coverage is the only coverage that really protects you and your family from the negligence of somebody else. When does it kick in?
It kicks in when the other side does not have insurance, or the insurance policy they have, say they have only $10,000 or $25,000, isn't enough to cover the damages that the person that you've sustained. And that's where it plays a very important role.
Right. And then if that's the case and you have to bring a lawsuit, then you do get to name the insurance company.
Because your lawsuit then is against the insurance company because they're in effect in breach of your contract with them. Your policy, your contract for uninsured motorist coverage.
Right. And so the jury gets to hear about the insurance company, but we don't get to say, oh, well, we paid all those premiums, and so therefore they need to pay.
No, that you can't say. But at least the jury understands who the real players are.
Right.
So that, they assess the damages and they know it's an insurance company that is contracted to pay, that is going to be paying the damages.
Right. And too many times people find out about uninsured motorist coverage after they talk to us because of a crash.
Right.
And they found out they don't have it.
Right. Because unless you were a lawyer or an insurance person or had been in an accident and found out how important it was, you wouldn't really have a reason to understand it.
No. And we see policies where our potential clients, they may have $50,000 or $100,000 worth of bodily injury liability coverage, and then they waive uninsured motorist coverage
to save $50 or $100 on their premium, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like we always, I always recommend that you look at your insurance declaration page or what your insurance coverage policies or benefits are, and look at it before a crash. Look at it tonight,
right,
and see if you have uninsured motorist coverage. And if you have too much bodily injury liability coverage and you want to keep the same premium and you're a good driver, well, reduce the BI coverage or bodily injury liability coverage, but add UM or uninsured motorist coverage to that.
Yeah. Now you still do want to keep acceptable levels of liability. I mean, today it's and that's a whole nother topic.
Right.
Really. But I mean, I've had friends ask me because they were in an accident and got a little bit close to whether they had enough coverage.
Yeah. Well, that will be a good.
Yes, that's a teaser.
That's a teaser for another show. We are almost done. We still have plenty of time to take another call if one does come in. But let me tell you, next week, I have attorney Mike Fainer going to be on the show. He's going to be giving answers to tax questions and such like that. But Lori, before we go, how can our listeners contact you or me or the firm when we're not here in the radio station?
Feel free to call our office. We're at Belcher and Sunset Point. The phone number is 727-796-8282. And we're always happy to talk with people.
Yeah, and you can also reach us on our website at voiceoftheinjured.com. That does wrap up tonight's show. Thank you for listening. Drive safely and watch out for those who don't. Take care.
Good night.